Very good evening to all of you once again. Ever so thankful to have you join in for today's Bible study. We left off in 1 Kings 4 with the great famous court case between the two prostitutes and the one child has already happened. Now Solomon is wanting to build the temple. And Hiram king of Tyre sent his servants unto Solomon, for he had heard that they had anointed him king in the room of his father, for Hiram was ever a lover of David. David, obviously, very good friends with this king of Tyre, Hiram. And in 1923, many archaeologists believe that they have found the sarcophagus of this Hiram, king of Tyre. I'm just going to read a little bit of it. The Hiram sarcophagus was the sarcophagus of a Phoenician king of Byblos circa 1000 BC during the time of David and Solomon. A Hiram is not attested in any other ancient Oriental source, although some scholars have suggested a possible connection to the contemporary king Hiram mentioned in the Hebrew Bible. And here is a color image of the actual sarcophagus. It actually has written, it's either on it or around the location that they found it in, a curse for anyone in whom opens it. And Solomon sent to Hiram, saying, Thou knowest how that David my father could not build a house unto the name of the Lord his God, for the wars which were about him on every side, until the Lord put them under the soles of his feet. This verse clearly tells us in this letter from Solomon to Hiram, this is clearly telling us that David shared with Hiram, because Hiram had already sent him many supplies in order to build David's palace. So David apparently let Hiram in on this building of the temple, his desire to build the temple. They must have been very good friends. But now the Lord my God hath given me rest on every side, so that there is neither adversary, now catch this, so that there is neither adversary nor evil occurrent. That word adversary right there in the Hebrew is Satan, which is Satan. I do believe that God placed a hedge about Solomon during these years. It takes 7 years to build the temple. Massive workforce we'll come to. But I do believe that these were the finest years of Solomon's life because God needed him to be focused on this temple. So, though it's very apparent in the scriptures that Solomon has rest about him on all sides in the physical realm, I believe even in the spiritual realm, Israel was given a time of just great peace. But before we go any further in this letter of Solomon's, because what he's doing is he is requesting building materials as well as servants. He wants to start building this temple. So it needs to be noted, though, that before Solomon ever came to the throne, David had already gathered together a mass amount of the supplies needed. 1 Chronicles 22:5, and David said, Solomon my son is young and tender, and the house that is to be builded for the Lord must be exceeding magnifical, of fame and of glory throughout all countries. I will therefore now make preparation for it. So David prepared abundantly before his death. That's what a lot of people were wondering, why didn't David move the tabernacle down to Jerusalem? Well, I believe it's because he was so focused on trying to get the actual temple built. But Solomon continues, And behold, I propose to build a house unto the name of the Lord my God. Okay, catch that. He says, Name, as the Lord spake unto David my father, saying, Thy son, whom I will set upon thy throne in thy room, he shall build a house unto my name. So Solomon says this is a house for the name of the Lord. It's much like a church house today. You go there knowing or expecting the presence of God to be there. Now we know that God is omnipresent, but a lot of people, whenever you get into those dire straits in life, you'll come to hopeless spots where you think God is a million miles away. This was a place where they knew for a fact they could get in touch with God. Solomon himself even makes the comment later on, But will God indeed dwell on the earth? Behold, the heaven and heaven of heavens cannot contain thee. How much less this house that I have builded? Many of the pagans, Dagon, Moloch, Astaroth, and all these, They believed, and even the pyramids in Egypt, they believed that those were, the pagans believed that those were the actual houses of their gods. Solomon knows that God is, he's everywhere. The heaven of heavens cannot contain God. So he says this is not for God to live in like the pagans always look at their gods. Now therefore command thou that they hew me cedar trees out of Lebanon, and my servants shall be with thy servants, and unto thee will I give hire for thy servants according to all that thou shalt appoint. For thou knowest that there is not among us any that can skill to hew timber like unto the Sidonians. Now, in case you're wondering, why is Solomon mentioning the Zidonians? Why is he mentioning them instead of the Tyrians? Well, it's firmly believed almost that the Sidonians, whatever, that they founded Tyre, and they were worldwide known for the world as they knew it back then for being experts in craftsmanship. They were the best of the best. Plus, they had the cedars of Lebanon, which were legendary. They were the best of the best cedars that you could ever get. And cedars were a tree of majesty, the greatest of royalty. But also notice what Solomon writes, and my servants shall be with thy servants, and unto thee will I give hire for thy servants according to all that thou shalt. So these are Gentiles and also much of the material is coming from a Gentile land. Gentile workers, Gentile land, reliance upon their craftsmanship. This is big. This the greatest building that the Israelites have ever had built. The Gentiles had more to do with than the Israelites, you could say. John Gill wrote this many years ago. Both Israelites and strangers, meaning foreigners, which latter were an emblem of the Gentiles concerned in the building of the spiritual temple, the Church of Christ. And whereas the number of strangers that wrought for the building was far greater than that of the Israelites, it may denote the greater number of Gentiles in the gospel church state mentioned besides these. And it came to pass when Hiram heard the words of Solomon that he rejoiced greatly. I really like that. And said, Blessed be the Lord this day, which hath given unto David a wise son over this great people. You can tell that this Hiram, I think that he's a believer. He says, Blessed be the Lord this day. And it's hard to imagine God having a king at this time ruling over Tyre that was an outright pagan. I believe it would have been disastrous to have had such. And Hiram sent to Solomon, saying, I have considered the things which thou sentest to me for, and I will do all thy desire concerning timber of cedar and concerning timber of fir. My servants shall bring them down from Lebanon unto the sea, and I will convey them by sea and floats unto the palace that thou shalt appoint me, and will cause them to be discharged there, and thou shalt receive them, and thou shalt accomplish my desire in giving food for my household. So Hiram gave Solomon cedar trees and fir trees according to all his desire. And before we go any further, the ancient Roman historian, Jewish man, Flavius Josephus also wrote that these two letters between Solomon and Hiram were still preserved. They had preserved these two letters. That's how important that they were. But they had preserved them up until his day, which was right around the time of Christ, 1,000 years later. So Hiram gave Solomon cedar trees and fir trees according to all his desire. And Solomon gave Hiram 20,000 measures of wheat for food to his household, and 20 measures of pure oil. Thus gave Solomon to Hiram year by year. And the Lord gave Solomon wisdom, as he promised him, and there was peace between Hiram and Solomon, and they two made a league together. And King Solomon raised a levy out of all Israel, and the levy was 30,000 men. And he sent them to Lebanon, 10,000 a month by courses. A month they were in Lebanon, and 2 months at home, and Adoniram was over the levy. So Solomon is gathering together 30,000 Israelites, And he sends them in shifts up there. That way it's not so grueling. But they work 1 month up there, and then they come back and they rest for 2, and it's going by shifts. Very, very wise. Very wise. A lot of burnout during a 7-year period. you know. And Solomon had 70,010 that bear burdens, and 70,000 hewers in the mountains. So 70,000 bear burdens and 80,000 hewers in the mountains. These would have been foreigners as well. John Gill also commented on this. 70,000 to carry the stones from the mountains out of which they were dug, and which were near Jerusalem to the city. These were strangers in Israel, as were those that follow. 80,000 that dug the stones out of the quarries and squared them. These with the others made 150,000. The number of workmen at the temple for 7 years was 163,600, and some make them even more. Now he's quoting from a source right there. But it's believed this went up hundreds of thousands, almost 200,000 people working on this temple for 7 years. Here's the thing. They could not build the temple on the site. It was it's holy ground. It's holy ground. And I believe that the reason for that, now this is my theory, why they couldn't build on the side, they had to bring it by sections, by pieces, and the pieces had to be perfect. I believe that is showing that God makes things perfect and in an instant. Whenever he makes something, he makes it perfect. There's no hammering and all of this hard labor. It's showing how God creates things. That's my opinion on it. I may be way off, but his preach is good anyway. Beside the chief of Solomon's officers, which were over the work, 3,300, which ruled over the people that wrought in the work. That's just the managerial type right there. A lot of these, the vast number of them, would have been the former inhabitants of Canaanites that were defeated, conquered, taken as in servitude to Israel. They served Israel at this time. But just the management team was over 3,000. That tells you how many workers were involved in this. And the king commanded, and they brought great stones, costly stones, and huge stones to lay the foundation of the house. This, a lot of it wouldn't have even have been seen by the public, yet it's great stones, costly stones, huge stones, perfect. Even the things unseen within the temple's construction were made perfect. And I believe that goes to show how even the things that we know and don't know and can and can't see, everything with God is perfect. Everything, whether we know it or not, whether we see it or not, everything is perfect. And he expects us as well to be in that very same manner. How even whenever we're not out in public, we should still be Christians. We shouldn't just put that Christian face on, which so many of us do. We shouldn't just put that face on for Sunday morning service. We should be like that when no one is watching. That's what God expects of us. And Solomon's builders and Hiram's builders did hew them, and the stone squarers, so they prepared timber and stones to build the house. Now I'm going to be showing an excellent video from Messengers of Christ on YouTube. It's actually going to show the temple and its layout. It's magnificent.
And it came to pass in the 480th year, after the children of Israel were come out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, that he began to build the house of the Lord. And the house which King Solomon built for the Lord, the length thereof was 80 cubits, and the breadth thereof 20 cubits, and the height thereof 30 cubits. And the porch before the temple of the house, 20 cubits was the length thereof, according to the breadth of the house, and 10 cubits was the breadth thereof before the house. And for the house he made windows of narrow lights. And against the wall of the house he built chambers round about, 5 cubits high, and they rested on the house with timber of cedar. The nethermost chamber was 5 cubits broad, and the middle was 6 cubits broad, and the third was 7 cubits broad. For without in the wall of the house he made narrowed rests round about, that the beams should not be fastened in the walls of the house. The door for the middle chamber was in the right side of the house, and they went up with winding stairs into the middle chamber, and out of the middle into the third. And the house, that is, the temple before it, was 40 cubits long. And the oracle in the forepart was 20 cubits in length, and 20 cubits in breadth, and 20 cubits in the height thereof. And within the oracle he made 2 cherubims of olive tree, each 10 cubits high. And he set the cherubims within the inner house, and they stretched forth the wings of the cherubims, so that the wing of the one touched the one wall, and the wing of the other cherub touched the other wall, and their wings touched one another in the midst of the house. And he carved all the walls of the house round about with carved figures of cherubims, and palm trees, and open flowers, within and without. And the whole house he overlaid with gold, until he had finished all the house. And for the entering of the oracle he made doors of olive tree. The lintel and side posts were a 5th part of the wall. So also made he for the door of the temple posts of olive tree, a 4th part of the wall. And the 2 doors were of fir tree. The 2 leaves of the one door were folding, and the 2 leaves of the other door were folding. And he carved thereon cherubims and palm trees and open flowers, and covered them with gold fitted upon the carved work. And Solomon made all the vessels that pertained unto the house of the Lord, the altar of gold, and the table of gold, whereupon the showbread was. And the candlesticks of pure gold, 5 on the right side, and 5 on the left, before the oracle, with the flowers and the lamps, and the tongs of gold. And he set up the pillars in the porch of the temple, and he set up the right pillar, and called the name thereof Jachin. And he set up the left pillar, and called the name thereof Boaz. And upon the top of the pillars was lily work. So was the work of the pillars finished. And he made a molten sea, 10 cubits from the one brim to the other. It was round all about, and his height was 5 cubits, and a line of 30 cubits did compass it round about. It stood upon 12 oxen, 3 looking toward the north, and 3 looking toward the west, and 3 looking toward the south, and 3 looking toward the east. And the sea was set above upon them, and all their hinder parts were inward. And it was an handbreadth thick, and the brim thereof was wrought like the brim of a cup, with flowers of lilies. It contained 2,000 baths. And he made 10 bases of brass. 4 cubits was the length of one base, and 4 cubits the breadth thereof, and 3 cubits the height of it. And on the borders that were between the ledges were lions, oxen, and cherubims. And every base had 4 brazen wheels, and the work of the wheels was like the work of a chariot wheel. Then made he 10 lavers of brass. 1 laver contained 40 baths, and upon every one of the 10 bases 1 laver. And he put 5 bases on the right side of the house, and 5 on the left side of the house. And he set the sea on the right side of the house eastward, over against the south. So was ended all the work that King Solomon made for the house of the Lord.